Good evening. You're watching The Digital Age. I'm Jim Zirin. Tonight we have an amazing show for you on how bloggers might overexpose themselves on the internet. Emily Gould recently wrote a cover story for the New York Times Magazine called Exposed, in which she told that blogging about her life had changed her life. The reaction to the article was overwhelming. The Times shut down posts after some 1,200 comments. Most of the criticism was negative about the article and asserted that Emily had narcissistically told all about the intimate details of her life in a way that let it all hang out. So our guest tonight is Emily Gould, columnist, writer, blogger extraordinaire, and new media starlet.
Oh,
Emily, welcome.
Thanks, it's good to be here, James.
Now, why don't you tell us, you can call me Jim even though I'm somewhat older than you are.
Jim,
well,
okay.
Now, why don't you tell us, how did you get started blogging?
I actually fell into blogging sort of accidentally. My friend Alice gave me my blog, Emily Magazine, as a birthday present. She built it for me, and she said, "It seems like you know, a lot of people have these. It seems like you're the kind of person who ought to have one. It seems like you need some kind of outlet." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I do, actually." And then I availed myself of it.
Did you always have a compulsion to tell people so much information about yourself?
I am innately gossipy, I think. I think I'm a storyteller. I always kept a diary, starting when I was maybe 8 or 9 or so. That's a word, compulsion. I think that some people are innately, my old boss Corey likes to call it divulgy, given to.
Well, that's a word, divulgy.
Yeah, just sort of given to, you know, like the town crier wanting to sort of be the first with the news, even if it does happen to be news about themselves or.
Now, when you kept a diary, did you share the contents of the diary with your friends?
No.
No, that was private. The blog isn't private, is it?
No, although you can sort of trick yourself into thinking that sometimes that, oh, this is in a secret, private little corner of the internet that only my friends and I know about. And at the beginning, I really didn't ever anticipate having an audience that was wider than my friends and whatever random people sort of stumbled on my blog.
So
I never I never actively sought out a larger audience.
But friends might include co-workers and people whom you met at a party, and then they would tell their friends, and pretty soon you have a pretty large audience.
Yeah, but why would they care? I mean, everyone and their mom has a blog.
Everyone and their mom has a blog. But do all the blogs tell about their sex life the way your blog did?
I think that aspect of my story has been exaggerated. If you actually go to Heartbreak Soup, I think there are actually 3 posts where I mention sex at all. But obviously it's a salacious detail of the story and people really latched on to it. If you are interested in reading blogs that detail the intimate workings of people's sex lives, there are a lot of them out there, and they're a lot more explicit than mine.
But they didn't make the cover of the New York Times Magazine. Why do you suppose your story was so well publicized?
Gosh, it's hard for me to say. I think partly because I had blogged professionally as well as personally. So I had that perspective on the workings of the blogosphere too. Sort of, you know, I worked in the restaurant, but also I was the food.
I think that you're something of an enigma to people. While some applauded your piece as a fascinating essay that told us all something we didn't know about the blogging generation, others blasted you, as I said, as a narcissist. And an internet exhibitionist. And now, do you think of yourself as such, or is it just inherent in the medium that you have to reveal so much of yourself on a blog to get attention?
I don't think it's excuse me. I don't think it's inherent in the blog medium that you have to reveal things to get attention. There are lots of blogs that aren't personal at all, and I was sort of speaking for a subset of what could be called a community, I guess, the blogosphere. The thing about
now, the blogosphere are people that have blogs and read blogs.
Sure. But we're lumping together a lot of different types of websites. We're lumping together professional enterprises, like the one I used to work for, Gawker, and hobby.
Now, Gawker is an online magazine,
you know, yeah,
which gossips about celebrities. Is that largely?
They say that their focus is media gossip, and when I worked there, I guess that was mostly the main thrust of what we did. It's sort of a magazine about anything that would be interesting to someone who is young and ambitious and lived in New York. So celebrities fall under that. And the inner workings of magazines and publishing houses, that sort of thing.
And there came a time when you began to post on Gawker about yourself, didn't there? Well,
you know, Gawker writers have always been opinionated and worked little details about their own lives and opinions into their posts. It's what makes Gawker more interesting than just reading a collection of links. But yeah, I did. There were 4 or 5 posts over the course of last summer where I really did sort of reveal things about myself, you know.
So at this point,
and it's a proud tradition that's carried on today. Like a Gawker writer will write, I went to this, I heard about this event. It sounded kind of boring, so I popped a Xanax and headed on down there. It's like, okay, you know.
And that's on Gawker.
Yeah.
And people see that and then they respond to it. Is that right?
Yeah, I got a lot of sort of personal response. People sort of speak back to you, and it's like a conversation. It's patently false, but it's a kind of a friendly relationship.
Now, at the time that you were blogging for Gawker magazine, and you were employed there full time, I assume you also had your own blog, Heartbreak Soup, and another blog which was called Emily.com?
Emily Magazine.
Emily Magazine, yeah. And you're blogging on all 3.
Well, I had actually let Emily Magazine sort of go defunct when I started working at Gawker because I didn't have much to say anymore. I was sort of saying it all on Gawker anyway, and I felt like there are things that I couldn't talk about anymore because the type of attention that would be focused on them would be different. So I started a it sounds ridiculous even to say it, but I started a secret blog, so that where I could put my sort of more private thoughts, and it was secret in that it was anonymous, but of course it wasn't secret because, like I said, I'm divulgy, and eventually I told some people about it. I told a small group of people about it. They told some people about it, and that's how secrets stopped being secret. Who knew?
Well. With regard to your New York Times Magazine piece, as you know, Rachel Sklar of the Huffington Post wrote, this was an extended blog post, an overlong modern love essay, 7,937 words that did not venture beyond the author's own experience. By the way, they ran, I think, at the same time an article about missile defense that was about 5,000 words. Daily Intel criticizes the fact that you use the word I or me 430 times in a 7,900-word article.
It's hard not to use the personal pronoun when you're writing about yourself. Sorry, go on.
Right, no, but I guess that's pretty fair. Do you often write about something larger beyond yourself as to what the significance is of all this personal blogging?
Do I have to? I mean, that wasn't what I was doing. That was, you know, someone could write that article, probably not me. I used my experience to open up this corner of the world to people who didn't know about it, to someone like Rachel Sklar, who's a media critic for a blog. Of course, these ideas will be old hat. I believe that post, not that I Google myself, but I believe that post started by saying something along the lines of, for the one person who isn't already familiar with the Emily Gould saga, that's a ridiculous thing to say. No one's familiar with the Emily Gould saga. This tiny little group of people in New York already sort of knew the basic framework of the story that I told, the actual narrative. But to get into what goes on in someone's head when they have a blogging job, that was a story that hadn't been told. And I had experienced it, and I wanted to put that out there so that someone who has no idea what goes on in this blog world, who maybe their son or daughter has a blog and they don't understand why that is, could sort of know about it for the first time.
Well, I think you said at one point on a blog that what you really wanted to be was a journalist with a byline. And then
did I say that? Where did I say that?
And now at another point, you said you were not really a journalist. I think you said that in the Kimmel interview on Larry King Live. Now, which was it? Oy vey. What are you? A journalist? A new journalist? A blogger?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I said that Gawker is sometimes journalism and sometimes not, and that's generally accepted to be true. That's a really tricky question. I'm evolving. I'm a writer.
A journalist as well?
I don't even know what you're wanting that word to mean.
Well, one thing it might mean is a journalist has an editor, typically, and a journalist, and you've been an editor at Gawker, and a journalist has certain standards of ethics. I mean, they try to print the truth, write the truth, and print the truth, and they try not to defame anybody unfairly, and they try not to invade someone's privacy. And when you blogged, did you feel that you were bound by those standards?
Well, I think ethical standards in journalism have been evolving sort of all century long, right? When you think about something like the standards that the press used to apply to the lives of public figures, like no one talking about JFK's affairs, that kind of thing, and then sort of, you know, cut to like the mid-90s and Drudge breaking the Monica Lewinsky story. I mean, people are sort of still adjusting to what the internet has meant for standards of journalistic ethics. Gawker is its own weird thing, and it totally changes depending on who's at the helm. When I worked there, I worked for a really talented managing editor named Corey Zika, and he does care, I think, a lot about accuracy and not defaming people and not running rumors that are just that, rumors.
And what about
now that Nick Denton's at the helm, of course, anything goes. He couldn't give a whit about accuracy or defamation. He just wants to write whatever's the most sort of interesting story.
And what about privacy issues? I mean, it really is nobody's business what the sex life is of a private person, but except to the extent they want to be divulgy and divulge it. But it is the public's business, perhaps, what the sex life is of the President of the United States. So can't you draw a line between public figures such as JFK and Bill Clinton and private figures such as a co-worker?
Well, who is public and who is private anymore? Is anyone who has any sort of online presence a public figure in a way? I mean, that's what people are still straining to figure out. That's what I was straining to figure out. I think I went to a really extreme position, and I stopped thinking of privacy in terms of, I started thinking of privacy in terms of a binary, right? Which is kind of traditional. Someone either is a public figure or is not a public figure. There's a spectrum now. I think you can be sort of semi-public or semi-private, and people...
You think the line is blurred?
I just think that I didn't spend enough time thinking about the idea that I could be in control of some information, but that it still wasn't okay for people to pry and invade further. You know, I thought that if I was a little bit out there, I had to be all the way out there, almost as a defense tactic, because if you already have told everyone anything that they might want to know, what are they going to use against you? Like, of course, they'll always find something. There's a tiny, tiny flaw in that argument.
Now, do you think it's ethical to make false statements on a blog about somebody else?
What are you referring to?
Anything. If a blogger says something about another person that's false.
Do they know it's false?
Yeah.
Well, that's defamation.
And suppose they don't care whether it's false or not.
Yeah, I'm against it.
You're against that.
I mean, this wasn't something that I engaged in. This wasn't something that I set out to do. You know, when I worked at Gawker, I wasn't ever working with vendettas and trying to smear anybody.
Well, let's, and inevitably we have to come to this, talk about your former relationship with your former coworker, Josh Stein.
Who's good friends with Rachel Sklar, by the way. They used to live in the same building.
Ah, well, you're not intimating a conspiracy, are you?
No, heaven forbid.
Now, you wrote on blogs about certain explicit details of your relationship, flirting with him on instant messaging while at the office when he was at the next desk, going on a professional retreat with him to Fire Island with others, where you began your relationship. He said you ran roughshod over his desire for privacy. Do you think that he was being fair?
And where did he say that?
He said that in the New York Post, actually.
Right, in the article where he revealed all of the details of our relationship. It's hard to take seriously someone's claim that they want to be private when they're writing about the details of the relationship that they had wanted to keep private in a magazine. How can someone not see that irony?
Well, he said, I guess he took the position you were out there with it before he was.
On a blog, but then
on a blog, but that's different from a newspaper.
Well, I guess he's using the same argument that I later used, kind of, or a variation on the same argument, which is, it's a tricky one to pull off, and a lot of people aren't buying it. But I still kind of think it's worth saying again that, you know, I wasn't, in order to tell the story that I told, I had to, in order to tell the story of sharing these details, I had to share these details. So
you did?
Yeah.
His New York Post piece was called "The Dangers of Blogger Love." And he made a couple of statements wherein only he or you knows, he and you know whether they're true or false. He said in the article that blogging is what he did to pay the bills, not who he was. But when it came to you, Emily Gould, the work her was her. She didn't change into civilian clothing like I did after the day was done. Now, do you think that was true?
Well, he has a blog.
He has a blog.
So I haven't visited it recently, but it's funny that he says that blogging was what he did to pay the bills, and now he maintains a personal blog.
So you think maybe his blog him is him?
I don't know, but everyone has a right to sort of change their minds about these things. I think everyone's sort of constantly evolving. Going back to what you just said, though, about how nobody knows whether some of these details are true or not. No fact checker from the New York Post ever called me about this article, but the Times sure as heck called Josh, as well as my mom and everyone else I've ever dated or worked for.
You're suggesting that the Times is a more careful publication than the New York Post.
Do you think that could possibly be true?
It may be true. He also quotes you as saying, it's your job, Josh. It's what you signed up for. Don't you know the private is public? Did you say that to him?
Wow, I feel like I'm on trial now. I think something sort of like that did happen. We did have that sort of weird confrontation outside of the Gawker office where I think I was like, but why on earth wouldn't you want me to write these blog posts about you? Clearly I was being retarded. That, you know, I think there was a more complicated. We're getting too into this aspect of the story, and I don't think this is what this stuff is really about. But writing about someone, I think it's about the medium, right? Because this is something that people can sort of go to and search if they're curious. Whereas if I'd written an essay about him in a book, or even if I'd written about him in a print magazine that doesn't have an online component, it would automatically be a lot more private. The thing that makes these details sort of more scandalous seeming that they're out there is because they're on the internet. It's, you know.
Why?
People have always written about their, people have always written about their affairs and their personal lives. Like most of literature is that.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Well, the lines have always been blurry, right? I mean, plenty of people have fiction.
I mean, Barbara Walters just wrote a book in which she talked about her relationship with Senator Brooks. So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, do you think the public-private distinction is beginning to blur? And that legitimizes you're making the kinds of revelations about your relationship with Josh Stein or
Don't
your other feelings.
get me wrong. I'm not wholly unrepentant about making those revelations in the medium that I made them in, but I'm not sorry that I wrote those things. I mean, I just I wish I'd written them and kept them private
in your old diary from high school.
Yeah,
maybe.
and then Barbara Walters style written about them 40 years later.
Yeah. If Josh Stein became a United States Senator.
Odds are that's not going to happen.
Odds are that's not going to happen. Now, after The Dangers of Blogger Love appeared in the New York Post, you posted to Heartbreak Soup the following: "It's better to leave well enough alone. Take the high road and just try to forget about this whole thing." But you didn't do that in your New York Times article, which came after that statement, did you?
I didn't take the high road? I didn't forget about the whole thing.
You didn't forget about the whole thing.
I did try to take the high road, though. I think that I made myself look a lot worse in the Times thing than I made anyone else look. I really think that everyone else pretty much comes off as a hero.
Now, there's a concept, I think you used this word in your article, called oversharing on the internet. Do you think you overshared? And what defines oversharing?
Personally, for me, oversharing is anything that you look back on with some hindsight, whether it's a couple of hours and a couple of days, and go, yeah, just crossing your own sort of internally set boundaries about what is and isn't okay to reveal. But of course, in the moment, and blogs do have this sense of immediacy, right?
It's seductive.
Have you blogged?
Well, I have since I started to think about having you on this show. It's quite
interesting. Did you start a Tumblr?
No, I don't know what a Tumblr is, but I'll get there. But I want to ask you about bloggers who perhaps undershare. There were two bloggers that were reported on by the New York Times in the style section recently. One was Melissa Morris, who has a blog called May to December, and she's the wife of a socialite. And the other is Emily Brill's blog. Emily Brill is the daughter of a publishing mogul, and she has a blog, and they talk about things like walking their dog and riding out to East Hampton in an SUV, and things that aren't quite so interesting to other people as perhaps some of the divulgy statements you made on the internet. Do you think that they're undersharers, and do you think undersharers will inevitably get attention too?
What aren't they sharing?
Undersharers. They're sharing very trivial details about their lives.
So you're opposing overshary blogs and undershary blogs that are sort of, that aren't telling stories so much as they're recording the mundane details of someone's life. That's funny. I like to call those what I had for breakfast blogs.
Right, exactly, or boring blogs.
Yeah. I mean, there's a weeding out process that happens, but there are a lot of different reasons why people pay attention to different blogs, and I can't actually begin to fathom why some blogs get the traffic or attention that they do. The things that people are attracted to when they're spending a lot of time online, I think, are determined by kind of a weird set of factors. You're looking to be entertained in a pretty specific way when you're sitting there at your desk. You're bored usually, right? So you're wanting to latch on to the most brain candy-ish thing possible, something digestible. There's not a lot of room for nuance. There's not a lot of room for assimilating a story with, you know, two sides. It's also easy to be distracted. It's a problem that newspapers are having, right? If you're sitting there on the train reading a newspaper, you're going to either read an article till you get to the end of the article, or you're going to put down the newspaper. You might read another article too. If you're reading that same article online, you know, you just open another tab in your browser and you start doing something completely different. So then, you know, the story or the blog, the newspaper, is competing with every single other bit of information that's available on the internet. People, I just think that our brains aren't elastic enough to even sort of wrap themselves around the availability of this much information. People haven't even figured out what it is that they want or why they're reading it. So I don't know. I don't know why people read Emily Brill's blog is the end of the story, I guess.
Well, that's a good answer.
It's beyond me.
That's a good answer. Do you think that Emily Brill and Melissa Morris, sort of yawn blogs and bloggers like that, and seeking celebrity, which is the currency nowadays? I
don't know. Maybe they're just expressing themselves.
Were you seeking celebrity or just trying to express yourself?
I was just doing what came naturally to me.
Blogging?
Always. I mean, it's funny to me when people impute some kind of motives to, when they're like, narcissist, attention whore, she's playing this game, and this, like, the Times thing was part of her strategy to, and it's like, no. If I'd had a strategy, I would have played this completely differently.
What would you have done? I think you said at one point that maybe you made a mistake. What would you have done?
I made a ton of mistakes, and I made them in a really public way. I can't imagine what point in the past I would have gone back to if I had it all to do again differently. But ultimately, this is just sort of this is the person who I am. This is who I am.
This is who you are. I'm afraid we have to wrap up.
Sure. Please, before I say anything
No, you've been wonderful. If I were a younger man, I might hug you, but I'd be afraid you'd write a blog about me. But
Jim,
thank you for coming by. Thank you for coming by.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more on the digital age. For the digital age, I am Jim Zirin. Thank you. Good night. And all the best.